Greetings, folks. Like, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Right then. So, whiteboard of ENFJ, the initiator idealist, the in-charge idealist. That's using Linda Berens's interaction styles. And you can find out more about that at bestfittype.com. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize this and see if anyone leaves a comment and see if it pops up on screen in StreamYard. So in this model, just to orient you, if you're familiar with the MBTI 4-function stack, that's in green. So you've got your FE, NI, SE, TI. So that's building on something that you already know. And it's in the same, roughly the same order there, strongest to weakest. So the addition would be the idea of clubs. And this is something here from Dario Nardi. So this is from the back of his most recent book, The Magic Diamond. And here himself, he doesn't use the term club because it's from Socionics, but he'll I've just got to rejig myself in order to stop obscuring the image. You can say here that this suggests that pairs of functions such as sensing thinking, which is the ST club, sensing feeling SF club, intuitive thinking NT are highly relevant. So the clubs are highly relevant. And here again, and this is actually about the ENFJ type. If higher scores of extroverting feeling with support processes, introverted intuitive and extroverted intuiting. So Dario's also talking about how NE is a strong function in ENFJ. So not to overwhelm you, I will get back on track and rejig this. We'll get rid of that bar at the bottom. So in this model, we do have the idea of clubs. I'm just going to zoom in on this. Also, for the Socionics Model A people out there, if you overlay the dimensions onto my model, you get a pretty sort of reasonable arrangement there. Top left is 4D, like that. Their dimensions, like my own dimensions, are different. And my own dimensions are based on what is important in my model in terms of sort of what is actually verifiable. Because Socionics Model A might say, oh, this is an accepting and producing function. How do you know? That's a sort of an internal dichotomy, whereas these are external dichotomies, in that a function being valued, you can sort of test that by what people value and ask them and sort of find out those sort of quadra values. And the same with default versus situational, whether someone has a strong introverting preference or extroverting preference. And the same with clubs. And this is particularly the case with abstract types, because the NF club is the NF temperament and the NT club is the NT temperament, the rationals and the idealists with the NFs. It's different with concrete types, where you've got SP and SJ, where the SPs are half ST and half SF, and so the same with the Guardians, because there's different splits. So with this, let's look at the first function. The first function being FE. You can see there that it's it ticks 3 boxes, in that it's a valued function, FE being a valued function, the green function. It's a default function in that it's extroverting, and ENFJ is a default extroverting type, and it's a club function. It's part of that NF club. So it's an NF function. It ticks 3 boxes. Whereas the weakest function, which I'll get on at the end, SI, ticks none of those boxes. So, as for what is the most important sort of dimension out of these, it's probably club, then valued, then default, probably. But there's much of a muchness with these dimensions. I'm just sort of recording what they are. And again, this is a model which has had quite a bit of input from the empiricals in terms of the information. So what I'm going to do is some of Dario Nardi's data there. I'm just going to put that on screen and sort of like where this comes from and the sort of the consistency with this slot. So for example, and I've done this for the example of ENFJ, 96% of subjects showed a tricycle configuration in the top 4 processes. And so that would be for ENFJ. So think of people with ENFJ preferences when they took the cognitive processes assessments at, and I'll write it down, here's to cognition.com for cognitive processes assessment. I'll put it on screen. So for that, where it would be 96% of people had FE first, then NI and NE, or FE, NI, or FI. So 3 of the top. So those out of those 3 functions, so 96% of people had an NF. 96% of ENFJs had an NF functions in their top 3. That shows that the club functions are highly relevant. Now, obviously, the first 2 are always going to be of that club, but that third one, so NE, is a strong, but it's an unvalued function in the ENFJ. It's sort of seen as obvious, but they don't care for it. But sort of like getting back to this first function, we've got here the, if you can see that, the, rejig myself. These are the subfunctions of FE, and this will, I'll sort of go through this. Now, I want to mention the role enactments and some information from Keirsey. And this lines up with Socionics, where you see this SE here, and this valuing of SE with FE, and also the fact that in interaction style, it's an initiator. It covers it up there, but it says initiating educator. It's a directive type. It's an in-charge type. It's an in-charge idealist. And so it's using its FE in a directive way. So in Keirsey's ENFJ profile, and please understand me too, he wrote that the ENFJ is a good teacher, even of resistant pupils. So ENFJ. So ESFJ can use SE, the assertive part of SE, when it's sort of like upset and or when it's defending the weak or children, that sort of protective role. Think of Amos Burton in The Expanse. Quick digression, he said there are 3 kinds of people in this world. Bad ones, those you follow, and those you protect. Only a guardian would say that. So what I'm sort of getting at here is the way that ESFJ and ENFJ use SE differently, and the way their FE comes across is that, and this is where combining systems helps. So ESFJ in Berens is in Keirsey and Berens is a collaborator and get things going type. They're looking for consensus and buy-in. ENFJ is an in-charge type. It's like the leader of the NFs. And so in terms of functions, there's a matchup there because you've got FE with NI, and NI has that vision of direction, the sort of a true path. And when you know the direction, that lines up with someone being directive. It's sort of difficult to be directive when you've not got a direction. And so ENFJ has these sort of functional correlates to why it is in charge, in that it's an extrovert, it's value in NI and SE, so it sees the direction and it's got a bit of that punch to drive along towards it. So that's how it's using FE differently from ESFJ. ESFJ is using FE in a collaborator way and combined with SI for providing someone's sort of physical needs, and ENFJ is using FE with NI to guide somebody, because NI is about guiding, development, intuition of development, sees the true path, and that is towards someone's psychological development. And I'll get onto that. I can get onto that. I'm going a little bit out of order because it's all sort of integrated. So maybe we can have a look at some of these FE ones here. The assertive FE, probably ENFJ is more likely to use this by default than ESFJ, except when ESFJ gets upset or have been rude to ESFJ, because they can sort of take that as sort of like someone being rude as a slight, especially in front of other people. Performing arts. I know Socionics tends to put ENFJs into the sort of, tends to type a lot of show players, that's actresses and actresses, as ENFJs, EIEs. Focus on the group harmony. It's probably more ESFJ, but this assertive type, and especially it's used towards idealist ends as well, as a mentor. And leading movements. Look at the way, say, Oprah Winfrey uses FE. So, what else? The next function. Oh yes, this is this idea that the best diplomacy is diplomatic enabler and weakest at tactical manipulator. And that ENFJ is best suited to enact the teacher role rather than the healer role, because the teacher role is directive and expressive, and the ENFJ is directive and expressive. So if you think of these as the type and the role, hand and glove. Hand and glove. The ENFJ hand fits the glove of the teacher because it draws on what they're best at. It's just like what ENTP is best at, the role of inventor draws on those strengths. Now, people can enact different roles, and development can lead to people developing different sort of intellectual skills. It's just that what someone is sort of naturally set up for can correspond to certain roles. And it is this distinction between role enactment and types that a lot of people do not make when they encounter Keirsey. And so they just look at Keirsey in terms of the roles, and they think, oh, this is just stereotypes. No, because you're just looking at roles. You got to look at the type and the roles, because he has a theory of social roles, because he was very much interested in intelligence and socially intelligent roles. So right then, 14 minutes already. I'm still on the first function. So NI, position 2. It's got two things going for it. It's a valued function. Here we go. We've got a bit of a YouTube celebrity here. I would right, just let me get this out. Hey, for some reason I have a nickname for Hell's Bells that comes out of every now and then. So NI it's a valued function and it's a club function, but it's not a default function. And again, used in combination with FE, it frequently comes across as a directive diplomatic enabling role, so mentoring, but it's expressive, so more leading a group of people. Again, Oprah Winfrey. I might need to update my references. So yeah, the NI stuff here, archetypes, inspiration, again, assertive, seeing the direction, the direction of the movement to go in. I think Marco and Aras in like the Expanse is probably ESTP rather than the NFJ. Right. Guiding invisible in the right direction, submissive aspects of NI. Yeah, that can come in. There's a part of ENFJ that is submissive. If the person that they're interested in is of the right stuff, has the right stuff. Because I know that's a little bit of a contradiction there between ENFJ. What ENFJ? Oh, thank you. If ENFJ is sort of like, because they are in charge, but in their personal relationships, they can be submissive to somebody who has the right stuff and who's worth following. Others, they're not going to be submissive to, but it's just a part of them that is submissive. Because NFJs can have objectively bad taste in romantic partners. But my sort of person who sort of like sees SE as dangerous. Thank you, Retro Gamer. If you put like that. Right, there we go. There's a big one. Thank you. So let's get on to the next function so it doesn't go too long. Right, so NE. This is, I've got two names for this position, fish is water and modest servant. Fish is water in that expression, the fish doesn't know it's wet because it swims in water all the while, is that the ENFJ fish doesn't know it's wet with NE. It just doesn't know, it's just not, doesn't value the NE because it values NI over NE. But I suppose ENFJ can use lots of metaphors and come up with analogies on the spot when leading people. And it's just something that's just come up with, and they use that analogy and it's come up with, and then it's sort of like probably discarded. And they're not going to actively pursue a possibility just for the sake of it, like say ENFP, because they've got that sense of direction with the NI. And then modest servant in that the NE is serving the FE. So again, it might be that where the FE is, the ENFJ is leading people, and on the fly, it will come up with these comparisons, these analogies. And so again, that's using the NE as a tool. Rather than NE being a sort of a co-pilot that has a bit of its own agenda, which can happen in me and INFP. So we've got you can see what's there. I don't want to spend too long on the subfunctions. They're just a bonus. That looking at things from different points of view, I can maybe see ENFJ doing that. Yeah. But not this actively explorer, not unless it contradicts NI. It's not so much acting on it, it's information in the background. But yeah, I mean, channel contextual thing, I could imagine they do that. Again, if it serves the FE, because it's not value, it's an unsung ally. An unsung ally. And it's my belief that developing these will develop the whole intellect. And this is probably why Keirsey thought that ENFJ was good at all of these. Best at this role because it's directive and expressive, and ENFJ is extroverted, and it's naturally directive and expressive, and the role is directive and expressive. Counselor is a directive role, so it's more reserved, and it's more reserved. But ENFJ can still do that, work one-on-one with somebody. This role is expressive and informing, doing a mediator, so the ENFJ would have to sort of like check itself back, be less directive. And this role of reconciler is informing and reserved. Now, ENFJ can do that intellectually, just sort of like check themselves back a bit, maybe not be as directive. Where, so for instance, in reconciling, ENFJ might naturally think, look, I know the direction these people need to go in, but the role doesn't call on them to say, right, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But actually, won't put it like that, but they'll put it in a more charismatic way. But you see what I mean? Because the role is informal, it's sort of a stretch for ENF, but they can still very much do it intellectually because it's part of that diplomatic intellect. Whereas the role of the educator, it's naturally drawing on the directiveness of the type. So what else? I'm going to get back to Haley's question. I'm going to get on to FI and the way that FI is used in ENFJ. How would an ENFJ view an FE break type and vice versa? Well, ENFJ is the conflictor of ISTJ and the supervisor of INTJ using Socionics intertype relations. And someone out there might say, no, Ben, it's the conflictor of SLI and the supervisor of ILI. Right. So FI, interestingly enough, so temperament matters. Temperament matters. So what it might be reasonable to say that on the whole, ENFJ is using FI more than ESFJ because the ENFJ is an idealist, an NF, and there's a lot of FI use by idealists. So, for example, the self-image words of the idealist: authentic, benevolent, empathic. Although the empathy towards ENFJs, because Keirsey wrote about this. Keirsey's got two really good profiles in Please Understand Me Too, because he had an ENFJ wife and an ENFP daughter, and there's a lot of psychological insight in those two profiles. And he wrote about ENFJ introjecting the emotional states of others. And getting sort of like taking on others' needs as their own, sort of like psychological needs. But because FI is related to identity and sort of forness, even the ENFJ, and so for instance, you can have an INFJ 4, Enneagram 4, but you can't have an ISFJ 4. It doesn't go. Crosses the temper. So a lot of, and all idealists are interested in identity, and that's a sort of like an FI related area. So again, like it's good, the FI information is going to be there for ENFJ. It's like a backseat driver. It depends on, but when those two come into conflict, ENFJ is going with FE, but it can use that FI information. But it's just going with FE. So in terms of, and so it's going to go more with the FE data that somebody gives off. And what I mean by that is affect display. And their intuition is going to help them as well. So, for example, the facial expressions and the tone of voice in context can be highly significant, literally. And that is like the reading of subtext and all of those things, and also the interjecting of emotions and feelings. So, and that's going to be given greater weight than the subjective aspect of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but I think it's going to play into it because there is that more like empirical focus with ENFJ, because their attention is directed outwards towards this empirical FE data that's coming off. Right. What else? So that's that club. So ENFJ is going to be using all of those NF functions, and it's there in Dario's data. There's that bit there. It's usually, when I made a cheeky comment there about Dario's observation. So we're going to go on to the idea of the counter club. So I'm just going to show you something about the counter club. So Vanderhoop noticed this in 1937. So we've got, this is the club for, let's do an extrovert. So we've got an NF here, we've got ENFP. You've got all the NF functions, and you've got this counter nucleus of ST functions. And then you've got here INTP, all the NT functions here. And you've got the counter club, the counter nucleus, and the conscious field of conscious orientation of the SF functions. And you can see the similarity there between this model and model V. Right. Oh, yes. ENFJ. This idea of the focus of attention is on the world rather than myself in the world. But ENFJ is an idealist. And so if you were to compare ENFJ and ESFJ, there might be a little bit more on the significance of myself in the world, because the idealist is interested in identity, than say ESFJ. So yeah, that myself in the world part might be a little bit bigger for ENFJ than ESFJ, because it's an idealist. Let's go back to the counter club. So yeah, we've got SE going on. Right, okay, so we got, yeah, this is instinct. So I got this from Vanderhoop, and he persuaded me. He reframed instinct. He reframed sensation as instinct. And I'm going to show you a card as to why. First of all, so as Melinda Behrens once said in the video, sensing is more than the 5 senses. So if you see here, this is not just sensing. Look at this. Instincts, exciting, impulses, action. We are on SE, so this is relevant. Thrill of action, spur action, thrill of action. So you've got thrill of action, follow exciting physical impulses. And so let's look at artisans, their self-image words. Artistry, audacity, and adaptability. Those are covered in the subfunction system. So this is why I came up with the subfunction system, is to get all these different aspects of SE and SI. And I sort of like took DC and H and then threw away normalizing. Because SI is always normalizing and SE is not normalizing. But again, this is that instinct. But I just want to put something on screen for a little bit, and you can freeze it. So this is Vanderhoop on why he changed sensation. And actually sensation is better than sensum. And why he changed it to instinct. I call it instincting to verbify it. So pause that, please. Read it, and then the next one gets a bit clearer as to what's going on. There. A strong impulsive drive towards certain acts. Oh, what function does that sound like? SE. Right. So let's get back to the subfunctions, which should be this one. So SE. Sort of like what I've got here. Stimulation, attention, immersing in the present context. That's Nardi. Situational awareness. Calmness under pressure. Assertiveness. So where this comes through in ENFJ is sort of like they will use SE to advance a cause. And so it's like, and again, they're using SE for FE reasons. But also, when unhealthier, the ENFJ can sort of like lose itself between the movement and them and itself in the movement, and maybe can identify the movement with itself. And this is where it becomes unhealthier, and you get like the sort of the cult leader thing could go on. Some NFJs out there might be thinking, I wish. But right. So again, SE. And again, the directive and informing is going to play into this. Naturally directive. So maybe towards the assertive kind of SE, because it's going to fit their assertive role. So what did Keirsey write about that? Good teacher, even of resistant pupils. So they're going to use that force sensing aspect of SE, that force sensorics aspect. Creative SE, yeah, I can see that. Harmonizing SE, yeah, like that would fit into like certain situation, reading the room for FE reasons, sort of draw on that adaptive SE. Apologies, I did not get the configuration of the screen correct. Oh yes, so did I mention backseat driver? Yeah, you got to listen to it, but you don't value it, especially when FE sort of takes over. But that dabbling tertiary, because it is counter club. Why is it only dabbling tertiary? Because it's a sensing, it's an instinctive function, and primarily ENFJs are about intuiting, and they're not going to give as much time to SE as the intuiting functions. You might think, why not? Because they've got an intuiting preference. They take the test, they generally have the intuiting preference. So although they like the SE, and this is the hot for the B side, they find these qualities attractive in other people, SE and TI. This is why ENFJs are attracted towards certain qualities of STPs, as long as they're not DICKs. Mature, well-developed STPs, they are going to be attracted towards their traits, their SE and their TI. And the jewel of ENFJ is ISTP. And they are hot for that TI, but I'll get onto that next. So again, dabbling. I describe this as eyes are bigger than its belly. I actually I can actually put something on screen that's a sort of a bigger explanation of that. So if you just pause that, that will be a bigger explanation of what that slot 5 does, of how it's dabbling, why it's the dabbling tertiary. And then you got a bit more information there on the functions in this column, if you want to pause that. And then I'll do it for the next one as well. Oh, that's a lot. Yeah, that's about the slot 6, what's going on there. I'm just going to go back to, it takes too long going through that graphic. SE, right, so dabbling. I'm going to, oh yeah, so what I'm saying is situational. So yes, this situational and default, I should have mentioned this a lot earlier on. So I have an explanation here of extroverting in the ENFJ. So if you want to pause that. So, right, there we go. So again, default operating mode, modus operandi. So it's like I said here, disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spiders, snakes. So it's like, that's not FE or FI, that's something separate. Wait a minute, I need to do this. So again, default mode for, I'll just read this bit out. For extroverting times, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data, such as immediate sensory instinctual data, which is SE, social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions and tonal voice signifying feelings. FE, facts, numbers, practical application. TE, and I'll get onto that later on, that ENFJ and ESFJ are very good at TE because one, they've got a lot of energy, and two, they will do the TE for FE reasons. So when they're at work, it's like, oh, everybody else is in TE mode. I'm going to do TE mode for FE reasons. So I'll say that now before I forget it. Then the world is possibilities, connections between ideas, situations that can be articulated, debated, because there. So ENFJ is good at all of those because it's default extroverted. It gets a lot of practice. And so it's like preference leads to practice, practice leads to ability. Now, I'll mention it now in case I forget. ENFJ can get burnt out if the TE is like at the expense of people. Right. It's instincting, extroversion, what he means by extroverting. And then I'll get on to situational. So, I'll give some examples here of when the extrovert will introvert. That's been mentioned before. I want to pause that. I'm just going to read this bit in the middle. I give examples of when the extrovert will introvert. All right. Yes, Wilma Twinley. Also coming to Wilma's housemates. Oh yeah, here we go. I'll read through that. Compared to the personal row in Vitgalenka's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the ENTP resembler Wilma Twinley in my stage play is introverting as she prays and reflects. And it is while she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, that's Jungian Cognitive Functions, which are of opposite vertung to the type, e.g. situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert, such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, TI, consider how something might develop or have a moment of inspiration from within, NI, run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences, SI, as a way to interpret it, or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere, or in dilemma, where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity, and this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally, FI. Wrinkle, if a person thinks about its dilemma, TI by definition will also be involved. So some hypothesis there. So it's going back to Ron Essay. Let's go to Suggestible Inferior. So again, we've got a default function. We've got two weak functions here. And these are one-dimensional in Socionics. You see here, 1D, 1D, two weak functions. In that we've got, this only ticks one box, valued, because it's a situational counter club function. It's not default, it's not an extroverting function, and it's not an NF function. But it is valued. And that can actually go a long way, depending on how much someone values TI. Now, in the NFJ, in terms of Enneagram, they could have a 5 in their trifix. So, and they are an abstract type. So, they can go towards TI. You could say, an example of someone on YouTube. Hi, Maurice. Not seen you before. So Megan Lavota, ENFJ, she's doing a master's degree in psychology. So you could say that she's going towards TI. and certain roles that she enacts are going to draw on TI, and she's drawing on TI by how she's got into typology. So, but you can see how, say, a feeling type study in psychology, there's going to be TI in that. There's going to be theoretical thinking in psychology, but the reason they're studying it is to understand people. So it's like they're studying the subject for feely reasons and maybe NF reasons, but they're going to be using lots of TI in the subject because a lot of academic subjects get all TI'd up. So, and you get like a sort of synergy of FE with TI. So maybe that's pretty much how ENFJ you use FE with TI, like in psychology, and they've got a natural interest in psychology because of that idealist temperament. Again, they like the logic and the reasoning, the practical reasoning of ISTP. Yeah. So if you're an ENFJ, if you search YouTube for John Grinder, co-founder of NLP, and listen to how he talks and see if the way he talks and what he says, see if that naturally jives with you, such as you might have a reaction of, if you're an ENFJ, of, wow, this is right, this is what I've known, but I couldn't quite put it in these terms. Is like putting what I know to be true in precise sort of TI terms. And so that would give you, so if you're an ENFJ and you like John Grinder, that would be an example of what ENFJ gets out of ISTP. So Maurice, have you seen my video on my channel about demographics of my subscribers? Hopefully a subscriber. Integration of theories, yeah, she's an integrationist of Megan Lavota, of like she does Keirsey temperament and functions as well. Yeah. So they're valued as well. Very powerful in terms of intertype relations. They're attracted towards TI and SE. Now we're going to get on to a weaker column, the TE. But as I mentioned before, TE can be strong in ENFJ and ESFJ because at work, the ethos is TE related. And as long as it doesn't contradict FE values, ENFJ will do TE for FE reasons. But if they're in a work environment where the corporate ethics are against that, that's going to be a bit of a problem for ENFJ, and they're going to try and go against that. Now, there was once on the channel an ENFJ who talked about, like, she worked in a mayor's office, and the sort of it going against her idealist values eventually led to her having sort of stress-related illnesses, just because of the incongruity of between sort of like her beliefs and sort of like what she had to be a party to. So sort of maybe the political corruption got to her. But in a work environment, ENFJ being a charismatic type can maybe change the work ethos, sort of like company ethics, corporate ethics, all these sort of things. If it's congruent with the ENFJ's value set, then the FE and the TE will work together. And also ENFJ being and also it draws on the directiveness of an in-charge type. It's good for like TE and getting stuff done, because the in-charge interaction style is good at getting stuff done. So what I'm sort of saying is ENFJ can be good at TE for work-related reasons. And so because TE is a function that's drawn on so much in many workplaces. What we got here? Pragmatic compromise. You can see the subfunctions I got here. I shouldn't. That's an artifact. N normal. That doesn't need to be there anymore. The normalizer. So, oh yeah. There's different kinds of TE that they're better at. So this gets into, so I think that because ENFJ is strong at NI, that they are, and weak at SI, they are more easily going to be able to do those roles that draw on TE with NI rather than TE with SI. So these sort of like coordinating roles where it's like they've got the NI, that intuition of development, how things and maybe projects are going to develop into the future. And so that kind of TI, that kind of TE, that sort of CEO TA, they're probably going to be able to do that better than the TE with SI kind of roles, which are more monitoring kind of roles, and especially inspecting details like an ISTJ. It's like, what is the significance of this, just this monitoring of details? That TE with SI, they're not going to do TE with SI, but I can see TE with NI them doing it because they value the NI. But if they've got to do a task that's related to two functions that they don't like, TE and SI, it's not even like supervisor. Yeah, but it's definitely inspector. Like ENFJ, they don't really want to be an accountant, which is kind of like an ISTJ kind of job. Right. What else? So again, contrarian alternative. Yeah, because it's the other side of it's an EJ function. It's the other side of the lead function. They are an EJ type, and it's like, as long as they don't conflict, these can be used in synergy. So let's get on to the weakest function. I have some ideas about how this might manifest in ENFJ. I'm just going to put that on screen so you can see it. I'm just going to say, so there, it's the one in the bottom, well, the back corner there. It doesn't tick any boxes. It's not valued. It's not a default function. It's not an extroverting function. It's not a club function. It's the weakest function in ENFJ. I'm going to give some examples of how it might be weakest. So as I mentioned before, don't like using SI with TE. Don't like those kind of details. I'll move that over there. Also, there's certain things, I'm going to get a bit speculative here, but there's an NLP thing of sort of like constructing a memory and recalling a memory as a whole. And it might be that part of the memory of ENFJ and ENTJ is that they sort of construct a memory from sort of pieces, even when they're recalling it. And so it's not sort of recalled as a whole. So that might be an aspect of sort of like the imaginative SI in ENFJ. Now, for very important, for emotionally significant events, I'm going to remember that and recall that well. Assertive SI, well, they don't want to stabilize the situation. They want to develop the situation. They want to improve. Whereas SI, the mindset is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if I got that on there, I should have put that on there as a mindset. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But NI, they're about improvement and development. Harmonizing, comfort sensing. Yes, as I mentioned before, they tend to be a bit binary with this, with the SI. And so they can sort of get stress-related illnesses, overwork themselves, put too much attention on other people and neglect themselves. But in terms of how they present themselves, ENFJs are going to take care of their appearance generally more than ENTJs, but some other factors come into it. Like if the ENTJ's got a lot of 3, then they're going to want to present a certain image. ENFJ sort of presenting a certain image because they care what other people think. So it sort of depends. Right, so here we go. Sean O'Neill. Now, let me get onto that now. Vom, like, I don't know what's going on there. Right, no internal monologue, easy to have your foot fall asleep because you don't notice when you're sitting. Yeah, there's that kind of like lack of, and it's related to NI in that, and one of the reasons you know you have the functions defined correctly is to get them as opposites in certain respects. Certain subfunctions are going to be opposite. So, for example, when someone's in an NI state, they sort of become disassociated from themselves and sort of out of their body. And SI harmonizing is very much in the body. And so, as you say there, they can get into that state of in NI when they're not noticing the rest of their body. Whereas SI Dom's always aware, pretty much. They're very much, and as Jeff says, Jeff Miller on the channel, Guardians will tell you about their medical problems. Right, so yeah, that's how they're weak at SI. And also, the other aspects of SI, yeah, inspiring or developing people. Yeah, it's part of the diplomatic intellect. Mentors. What have we got here? NI is unsymbolized thinker. So you automatically aren't thinking of reality. Yeah, if you're saying unsymbolized thinking, so would that include so thinking outside of language? Because language uses symbols in that you've got sort of an arbitrary relationship, mostly arbitrary relationship between the word and the sort of like the signified or interpretant, depending on whether you're using Saussure or Peirce. So this sort of unconscious thinking, I'm going to sort of come to common Enneagram types of ENFJ. Enneagram 2, Wing 3. Enneagram 2, Wing 3. 6, any type can be a 6. They're not going to be a 7. They're not going to be a 5. 8 depends. I can see an 8 fix in ENFJ. It depends how you conceive of the 8. If your conception of the Enneagram 8 is that they're cut off from their feelings, that contradicts ENFJ. But ENFJ can be controlling. So I could say that I could see them as an 8 fix, secondary fix for ENFJ. 9 as well. And I can see 1 as well for ENFJ. So 9, 1, 2, 3 is too cut off from its feelings. The 4 is possible. I know that I'm just saying, yes, she mentions her surname on YouTube. So yeah, if you look under like Counselor Raquel Buchanan, she identifies as a 4. But usually 4 is more FI related. But I just want to sort of finish on because something about NI, I can put that on screen for a moment. Something about NI. Actually, I'll just put. Actually, what I should put on screen are like the 6 different kinds of. You're an 8. Well, an 8 what? ENFJ. Well, it depends how you conceive of it. I mean, at least the ENFJ is an in-charge type. I think by necessity an 8 has to be in charge. So I'm more open to an ENFJ 8 than I am an ENTP 8. So Vanderhoop said something about unconscious thinking. and why he didn't think it was a good thing. Well, no, what he meant was, right, where is it? Let's have a look. Intuition. Well, it's going to be too hard to find, make it too long. Right, let's get back. All right. Have we got any other questions? Right. Yeah, you see, that's the thing. If it's just about control, then I don't see why a feeling type can't be an 8. It depends what is integral to the fixation. And if you're defining it based around the fixation, if the fixation is control of your life and people not exploiting you, but if you then start putting in these other traits into the description, such as the 8 is cut off from its feelings, then it's like, but it's like, I would think that out of necessity, the 8 has to be an in-charge type because it's controlling the environment. So it's going to be directive and expressive. So it has to be, this is why usually 8s are ENTJs, ESTJs, and ESTPs. Yeah. So an ENFJ 8, I mean, it depends. It's like, how do you know that you got the 8 description right? I mean, if you're just going on the fixation, if you're just talking about control, then I can say that an ENFJ could be a control freak. Yeah, because there's a lot of Enneagram descriptions where there's stuff in there that's coming from the Jungian type. Maybe I'll. Yeah, he didn't like. Yeah, here we go. Try to understand how often. Right. Yeah, that's like I said. I mean, I can accept that. It depends what's in the description of 8. It's like, but those descriptions of the 8 are based on people who have that fixation, but the people who have that fixation also have a Jungian type. And if most of the people with the 8 fixation are also ENTJ and ESTJ and ESTP, then you're going to end up writing in the descriptions, oh, they're unrelated, they suppress the feeling and they're not related to their feelings. Right. Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to that. Right, Cami9. So who is? Hi, Cami9. Are you a subscriber to the channel? Do you have your own YouTube channel? Right, I'm gonna try and what I'm gonna try and do as a bonus for you all. I'm gonna put Vanderhoop's 6 features of intuition on. Give you something to look at. Okay, so is that within the elements? That'll be within that. That's the chat. I've got to go Vanderhoop. Conscious orientation. Scans. Intuition chapter. I'll probably do this as a separate chapter as well. I should actually put this in is it slide elements common to each video? Yeah. I think actually what I should have done is put that on as well. I'll put that on first. So the after Socion. Oh, you're back. Would the ENFJ cult leader be? Oh, yes. Perhaps they could be E8 fixated. Perhaps they could be E8 fixated. But like I said, I mean, it's how we conceive of the 8. But I think that the 8, though, given that fixation, they have to be in charge. They have to be like have that interaction style.